And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another weekly review with The Robot, brought to you by the Movie Pope. And here he is, bolts and nuts akimbo, The Robot.
Happy Veterans Day, or should I say, Happy Veterans Day Eve. To honor the men and women who sacrificed their lives for our freedom, we at the Movie Pope podcast wish to thank them for all they've done. Without their sacrifice, we couldn't be so bold and crass in our reviews. I mean, if we were living in Russia, for instance, we'd all be in Siberia just for criticizing a movie too harshly. November 11th is such a significant day, not only as a way to honor the fallen, but to commemorate a day when, after for long years, the guns finally fell silent. November 11th, 1918 was when World War I finally came to a close. And what better way to commemorate this day than reviewing the Sam Mendes directed epic 1917? Now, when it comes to war films, if you asked any ordinary schmuck on the street to name their favorite war movie, chances are it'll be set during the Second World War. And you'll probably get a bunch of different responses, from the Dirty Dozen to Where Eagles Dare to Fury, but World War I is like the war Hollywood forgot about. There aren't that many one can think of, besides Paths of Glory and this film here, and maybe Wonder Woman. Legends of the Fall counts, too, even if the depiction of the war was pretty brief. It's a conflict that, for us here in the States anyway, isn't as catchy because we were only involved for a brief period of time and it didn't have as much of an impact as it did on the European continent. But we're here to give this war and those who fought in it the dues they deserve. If you've got a friend, a loved one, or family member who served or is serving right now, please thank them and give them some love. So, without further ado, let's take a trip to the Western Front in northern France and see what life was like for the average soldier fighting in the muddy trenches, just trying to survive. It's amazing to think that World War I was over 100 years ago. But it was the first major industrial conflict that was global in scale. Before that, wars were pretty localized and rarely affected people in other countries. Soldiers still fought in line formation, cavalry units used horses in daring charges, and casualties, while big, were not mind-boggling enormous. The American Civil War, for example, was astonishing just based on the scale of lives lost, at 600,000. Which was a large percentage of the population at the time. By August of 1914, people were entering the conflict with old-fashioned notions of warfare, but they soon learned the hard way. The industrialization of warfare definitely changed the way wars were fought, and not necessarily for the better. When the movie starts off, we can see just how stark the war is. There are no dashing officers, brave cavalry charges, chivalrous acts, or heroic assaults. Rather, the carnage has stripped away all life, turning northern France into an alien landscape. We travel with Lance Corporals Schofield and Blake and experience the horror and aftermath of 3 years of conflict, not just on the land but the people as well. The soldiers are having a rough go, but so are the civilians, who are as vulnerable as those on the front lines. It's no surprise that when November 11th, 1918 arrived, leaders saw this as the war to end all wars. Unfortunately, it wasn't really the end, but really the beginning. The story is relatively simple. Based on the intel gathered, the Germans pulled back, tricking the British into thinking they are retreating. In reality, they are planning to entrap them and are counting on the British to attack. To that end, Lance Corporal Schofield and Blake are ordered to locate the commanding officer of a regiment and warn them not to advance. The movie is an odyssey across the wasteland that is northern France, surviving the perils of no man's land just to reach the Devonshire regiment in time and persuade them to call off the assault. It's all the more pressing for Blake because his brother is part of the Devonshire, spurring him onward, but, unfortunately, he doesn't make it. And Schofield is left to carry on, arriving just as the men of the 2nd Battalion prepare to go over the top. For a moment you wonder if Schofield will accomplish his mission or if it was all in vain. Fortunately, Mackenzie relents and pulls back, And all the suffering and misfortunes he suffered just to get this message through wasn't in vain. I really felt for Schofield throughout the movie, because all he's got is his wits and his training to get him through this ordeal. And you gotta applaud his courage, too, because the territory he's crossing is crawling with Germans who won't hesitate for a second to take a shot at him. But he's doing this not simply because of duty, but also because of his desire to save his fellow soldiers and to save Lieutenant Blake when he lost his friend midway in the journey. This film follows the great epics of the past, keeping the plot simple and easy to follow and letting the hero tell his tale through his actions, where every little thing seems monumental, and exhibiting courage not because he fears danger but because he fears what will happen if he does nothing. If that doesn't define what it means to be a soldier, then I don't know what is. The big takeaway from this movie is the continuous shot. As Schofield and Blake traverse across the front, the camera just stays on them, as if we were there with them. And the way it comes off, you'd think they just ran the camera and did it all in one take. If only that were true, they used long takes and carefully choreographed the camera to give us the impression that it was one long shot. As a robot, I think this is a work of technical wonder of cinematography. Let's not forget the way the sets were carefully researched and designed to give us the feel for what life was like in the trenches and out in the field. And even the uniforms the ordinary soldier was wearing draws you into the world in which they've created. They're not crisp and neatly pressed, but dirty, worn out, and lived in, telling the story of each man who had to get up every morning, not knowing if that day would be his last. Combine all that together and it tells a seamless story that just feels natural and organic, as if we were there ourselves. Sure, it'd be pretty easy to just CGI the entire thing and call it a day, but the attention to detail and the technical know-how just to pull it off indicates that this wasn't just any other war film, but rather, a labor of love. 1917 is a masterpiece on the narrative and technical level. And I must say, it's pretty cool to see the big names in British cinema make their appearance, from Colin Firth to Benedict Cumberbatch as the rough and ready men who fought in the First World War. Furthermore, it's the first movie in modern times to give a proper portrayal of this conflict in all its grittiness. There's no Amazonian princess out to save anyone or a comedic angle like in Blackadder goes forth. It's just a stark, unashamed visual experience of what it was like in 1917. As I mentioned earlier, we're living 107 years since the war ended and there are, so far as I know, no living survivors. So all we've got is this film and others like it to carry on the legacy of what happened during those for years. It's almost obligatory, really, to carry on through the art so people never forget just how terrible these wars were and not to romanticize them, but to remember that, in any time and place, war is hell. Sam Mendes made this movie to honor his grandfather who served in that war. But I say, for those who don't have that personal connection, we should still honor them the best way we can. And if it means watching a movie like 1917 and appreciating it on the aesthetic and cinematic level, so be it. But we do best to also appreciate the humanity on display. Thanks for watching, and if you don't mind, please leave us a like. It helps a lot. And while you're at it, subscribe so you never miss an episode drop. This is the Robot signing off.